Alright, so welcome everybody. My name is James Gregoire, I'm a representative from Fairfield. I represent Fairfield, Fletcher, and Bakersfield. So let's go down through what we're going to do. And then we'll start. So I got my little handy piece of paper that says we're going to open. So that's what we're doing right now. Then we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to have an introduction from our host like we usually do. Then we're going to do our quick intros of us and what the legislators are going to do, because we want to make sure there's time for questions. They're just going to say who they are, what they represent, what committee they're on, and just what their committee does. Not the specific bills. If you have questions about specific bills, we'll talk about them, but we could get mirrored down in that for a long time. So we want to make sure that we get to you guys. I can tell you a lot of bills, and by the time we're done, we would be here until 2 o'clock just on my committee's bills. Legislative intros, and then we're going to have open discussion. So for the open discussions, same as always, just be respectful, no personal attacks, and one question per round. But we usually have time to get to other questions. Just keep on asking. So with that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I almost got Representative Toof, Town Manager Toof. Would you please give us your town intro?
Can you guys hear me, or should I grab a microphone?
We hear you.
So, thank you all for coming. This is great that I can host the first legislative breakfast here. This is my first time in 8 years where I haven't been sitting at that table. I'm sitting on the side. I've served St. Albans City and St. Albans Town for almost 8 years, and I served on House Education. Now I'm the new town manager. I started in November of 2025, so we're fairly new. We have we built this new building. I hope you love it. It's great. It's really big. It's bigger than I could ever think we would need, but it's built for the next 50 years, so if you have a chance to take a look around and say hi to people that are here. We have a few workers in today through the weather and some flus. But we are, the town's is in a really good spot. We built this new town hall. We just built the town garage over on Brigham Road. It looks great. We have a great crew over there. We have a great crew in here. We're looking at development, working with a new CHIP program that the state passed last year on getting more development in here. We'd like to see our grant list grow. But we have a lot of stuff going on in town. We just passed our budget on Tuesday, and it's a fairly good budget. It's up a few points, but we're going to have enough money from surplus from last year to cover any kind of tax increase. We were very mindful. The select board was very adamant that they were mindful that they saw the anticipated 12% increase in property taxes from the education fund and the school tax. So they were like, let's build a responsible budget. Let's build a budget that is fair to the taxpayer to stay off the town while not losing any services. And we were able to do that. And we had interim manager Corey Parent was here for a few months. He helped with that. And when I came on in November, I kind of took over that role, and we kind of worked together to get that out. I can answer any questions after. I know this is going to be for the legislative team here, but town issues, just town issues we can talk about, or plans, or anything you have, good or bad or indifferent to say about the town. We want to hear. We love hearing from our constituents here in town. So, anything else? Do you have any questions for me, James?
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having us. They don't know this yet, but they're going to be on timer. You get 2 minutes, starting with Senator Norris, to say who you are, who you represent, and what committees you're on, what they do. And I will start the button now.
Good morning, James. Good morning, everybody else. Thanks for being here, fighting all this weather to be down here. I have yet to plow my own driveways and whatever else, so when we get down this, I'll be back there doing just that. I'm Senator Robert Norris. I represent Franklin County with the exceptions of excuse me, Montgomery, Fletcher and Fairfax, but I do represent the town of Albert also in Grand Isle County. I'm presently in my 6th year. I vice chair the Senate Judiciary, obviously, and I sit on appropriations. This is my 2nd year on appropriations, and that has been, needless to say, somewhat overwhelming. It's been a learning process. They said, well, you have knowledge of budgets, you know, being the past sheriff for 20 years. I said, this is true, but it's the difference between $1.2 million and $9.4 billion. So there's a lot of undertaking that goes on there. I won't tell you exactly what's going on unless you have specific questions, but I know this year will be a lean year. Obviously, you fully realize the governor put out his budget address, and he came up with a $9.4 billion budget, so we'll be addressing that. We haven't started on the 27 budget as of yet. We've been working with the Budget Adjustment Act, and we're doing what we can down there, but like I said, it'll be a lean year. We'll try to emphasize those areas that need to be continued here moving forward. So I'm glad to see everybody here. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Yes, Alan DeMar. I represent Enosburg and Montgomery. I'm on the Healthcare Committee, and as of last week, we've got 30-something bills on our wall. We're supposed to, each one of us, there's 11 on the committee. We got to prioritize what we see, and we all went down through, and I was the odd duck. I said none of the above. I said we were talking about healthcare, affordability of healthcare, and I don't believe any of these bills is addressing that. So I didn't get off on a good start with my committee, but that's what we do, and we got a ton of bills. We've already passed one through the floor. We got 2 this week. I'm supposed to be speaking on one of them, reporting on one, and it would be the prescription drug discount card. You'll hear more about that. And so other than that, we got a ton of bills, and we got some tough decisions with our health care. I see we got a gentleman right here from the hospital. So we got to be working with those folks more closely than we are. So that's about it. If you got any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer.
Thank you. Lisa?
Good morning. Representative Lisa Hango. I'm Vice Chair of the Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee in the House, Co-Chair of the Rural Caucus, and Co-Chair of the National Guard and Veterans Affairs Caucus. My committee deals with state, local, municipal government and the administration thereof. We also have liquor and lottery. We have cannabis control. And a few other odd jurisdictions that don't belong to any other committee.
Thank you.
That was
Matt?
well under 2 minutes.
Yes, it was.
Good for you.
Good morning, I'm Matt Walker. I am in my 5th year, my first full term as the House Transportation Chair, so thank you for coming out on the snowy roads. We primarily deal with everything related to transportation and its funding, as well as anything related to motor vehicles and any changes of proposed pieces. Our budget for transportation is just shy of $1 billion in the state. It's about 2/3, a little less than that, with federal money and state money, about $330 million in transportation state funds and $600 in federal funds, and our job is to maximize the best spending related to roads and to address anything related to motor vehicles. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I represent Swanton and Sheldon, I'm sorry.
Senator Brock?
I'm Randy Brock. I represent Franklin County and the town of Alberg in the Senate. I was first elected to the Senate in 2008, I believe. Before that, I was a state auditor. In what we do in the Senate, the Finance Committee is a partner to the Appropriations Committee that Senator Norris is on. Senator Norris spends the money, and in the Finance Committee, we have to raise the money to match what we're spending. And that is a challenge this year, to say the least, given our financial situation that we have. And the problem that we've had regarding property tax in particular, and a real desire, I think, from both parties and also from the administration, to not have that kind of major tax increase again this year. It's going to be a challenge to be able to ensure that we don't. And we'll probably talk more about that as we continue.
Thank you, sir. Joe?
Yeah, Representative Joe Luno, St. Albans City, Franklin 3 District, which is wards 1, 2, 3, and 4 in St. Albans City. I serve on corrections and institutions. Institutions primarily deals with the maintenance of state-owned properties, and in corrections deals with, you know, how we deliver correction services. And the corrections budget's a little over $200 million. You know, some focal points this year. I think we're probably going to see some movement on a juvenile facility. It appears that way, maybe, to replace Woodside, that has been closed for some time now. And there's a lot of conversation evolving around our women's facility to replace Chittenden.
Thank you. Lynn?
Hi, I'm Lynn Dickinson. Welcome to my district. I represent St. Albans Town. I also was elected in 2008. I've been there now. This is my 18th year. I've sat on a variety of committees, commerce, judiciary, institutions, and currently I'm now in my second term in appropriations. We have just finished, or just about to finish today. We're going to vote today on the Budget Adjustment Act, which is the sort of the halfway through the year kind of, let's see what we need more of and what do we need to add in here. It's not a budgeting tool. It is a way to go and take care of things that we hadn't anticipated. It's much smaller than in the past because we don't have as much money. We're coming to the end of the ARPA money. Most of that, all of that, hopefully has been obligated, and this is going to be the last year that we have it available to us to spend. It has to be all spent by December of '26. So we're sort of getting to the end of that run with the ARPA money that we got for COVID. And we're going to start tomorrow on the regular budget. We got that from the governor last week, so we are going to be starting on the hearings and the things that we need to do for the big bill.
Thank you. Ashley?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for braving the snow. Ashley Bartley, I represent Franklin 1, which is Fairfax and the majority of Georgia. I am currently the vice chair of General and Housing. Our committee does about 50% housing, 25% labor issues, and then the other 25% is kind of your kitchen drawer that has a little bit of everything in there, and also some social justice issues mainly come through my committee. I also am the co-chair of the new nonpartisan Caucus for Vermont's Economy, and I also sit on a committee through CSG, which is Council of State Government, on housing. So really put my focus on a lot of the housing initiatives for our state.
Thank you. And I will turn this back, Joe. Okay. And as I said, I'm James Gregoire. I also serve on the House Corrections and Institutions Committee, so I won't regurgitate what Joe said. It turns out it's true. I am the vice chair of that committee, so I'll use my 2 minutes to just talk in general about our delegation. We're very fortunate here in Franklin County that about roughly half the delegation is chairs or vice chairs, and we're the minority party. You don't get that by being unreasonable. You get that because you're respected by the members of the leadership in the House. We have very positive relationships throughout the building, in the House and the Senate, and with staff. We have positive relationships with the administration, with the Treasurer's Office, Secretary of State's office, etc. And that's something that's really important because, at least in Montpelier, we have this saying that we do things the Vermont way. And in the building, we generally do. And that means that we don't engage in the political ranklings of Washington or some other states. We try very hard. It's really not actually that hard. We're just good people. Everybody in that building is a good person. Do we have different opinions? Yes, we do. Usually how to deliver something, not that it needs to be delivered. How do you solve homelessness? Everybody has a different idea. Whether you could be put 50 Democrats or 50 Republicans in the room, and guess what? You're still going to have 47 different opinions on each side, let alone on the different sides. But everybody wants to solve the problems. Everybody wants to have a better Vermont for everybody. And I think that that's important for people to really understand. There are forces out in the general public every once in a while. It's a very small minority of people that want to create division where there isn't any. We have real issues to solve. And they won't be solved by division. They're solved by working together. And that's what we're committed to do. So having said that, I will regurgitate that, I don't know why I said that, but I will reiterate that for the question and answer period, there's no personal attacks, be respectful, and one question per round. And I was gonna start with Amy Brewer, but she can't make it today. I promised her that she could go first because she got cut, she didn't get her chance last year. Just raise your hand and I'll call on you, address to me, and I will divvy up. Who wants to go first? Richard.
This would be for anybody, but I guess education seems like a huge issue. I guess my question is a broad question. Any real hope for education reform?
Lynn, do you want to start on that?
Well, that's a good question. Do you need this?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Can everybody hear?
It's a good question. I mean, there are 3 people in this delegation who worked on that bill, Act 73. We had someone in education, we had someone on government ops, and we had someone on ways and means. Those were the 3 groups that put together what was a really complicated bill. We have gone through this routine before. We did the union high schools back in the 60s, which probably was equally controversial. People wanted to keep their local little high school and, in a place like Franklin, for instance, and they became part of MVU. I think that was one of the last high schools that actually became a union high school. I worked to go on the BFA board to make an independent school a union high school. It took 30 years for us to go and do this, starting in the mid-70s in the city and town, and then eventually after Act 46, well, actually in 2004, we actually voted 3-1 to make BFA a union high school, but that was a long and sometimes divisive issue. So I've actually worked to make an independent school a union high school. We were the most public of all the independent schools, but, and then in Act 46, which was in 2015, 2016, we again wanted to go and combine the districts together and combine and make more workable supervisory unions, basically. And that's when the Maple Run was formed. It was City Town Fairfield, which was our supervisory union, and it became and BFA, it became a supervisory district. And that happened in a variety of different communities in the state. And that also, it had a cost containment feature in it in 2015. And it was based on your average, I'm trying to remember, the yield. The state average was like $14,000 and something. And if you were above that, you were calculated, you couldn't raise your tuition or your cost per pupil any more than, like $150 per student. If you were below that, you could raise more money. So it was a cap on actually how much you could spend. And it got a terrible response. It was a really overwhelming response against this feature in that bill that from the superintendents and the school boards and all of the people that would be involved in education, what we call now the Vs. And so we went back the following January in 2016 and eliminated it. But cost containment is one of the issues that we have here. Basically the way it is now with Act 60 and 68 is that we vote for the, as a community, you vote for what you want to spend on your schools. And then that money all goes into the pot, into Montpelier, the statewide property tax. And it doesn't matter if you raised it 12% or 1%. It all goes into the pot, and then it gets redistributed back to you. But the legislature decides how much, it's what they call self-correcting. The ed fund is self-correcting. Whatever it is you need to spend, the legislature has to set a tax rate to make it possible to collect that money. And right now we put all of our property taxes in one pot, we put all of our sales tax in one pot, we have much of our purchase and use tax for our car sales in there. We have lottery, we have a couple of other small things. But, if you're frugal, for instance, like I represented Fairfield. Fairfield was traditionally very frugal. And one of the years that I represented them, they raised their budget 1%, but their taxes went up 26%. And that's because places like Burlington were raising theirs 12%, or somebody was raising it 8 or 9%. And so it defeats any cost containment. No matter what you do, you're going to have to pay for everybody else. So this bill is really an attempt to go back to something we had before called the foundation plan. We had the foundation plan for many years. Madeline Kunin put it into effect back when she was in office in the 80s. And it's going to go back to what most states do use. Most states, like 43 of them, use the foundation plan as their funding, and we'll have that. And then we will go and have, there will be other, we're raising more money now than we did when that was in effect, so we're probably going to be able to fund it properly. And then there will be a 5% over that $15,033 or whatever it is that they're proposing to start with. There will be another 5% that you can raise your taxes locally that you will vote on. And that is up to each community to decide to do or not to do. And there will be an index that will be indexed so that you can go in and raise the money a little more every year. You know, it'll be like a CPI. So it will not stay at $15,033. It will go up a little bit more. And there will be other things there's a whole bunch of other things in there, you know, that we're looking at. It's a very complicated, long bill, but but just the basic thing is that we will be able to vote on if we want to spend more than the standard foundation yield, cost per pupil. And that's what we're going to vote on as a community.
And I think, you know, obviously we all know that education is probably one of the biggest issues, probably the biggest issue this year. Healthcare as well, right? That's a big issue. Lynn hit on my example because the whole time you're talking, I was thinking about how Fairfield one year had 1%. I mean, we are very frugal. We're a frugal town. And we had a skyrocketing tax rate because of Arlington. And it was specifically because of Arlington that year. So there's a problem. So the other thing that's important to understand is it's early in the process. It doesn't seem like it's early in the process. And if you're a person like me, whenever somebody says, oh, we're just starting this conversation, I'm like, well, we've had this conversation for 10 years. So I understand that frustration. But we don't know what the finished bill is going to look like. You know, the Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem have said publicly that they support working on that through Act 73. But what does that look like at the end of the day? And I know Lisa,
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
Lisa, Ashley, and I will have a meeting with the Speaker later this week, and that topic will come up. You know, what this is actually, you know, where are we going? Because I know that the Education Committee hasn't really touched it yet this year. And I checked in with the leadership of that the other day. So, does anybody else want to say something? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say that we spent $2.3 billion, that's with a B, out of a $9.1 billion budget. That's about 25% of our budget or 23% of our budget. And it has grown, we've had increased taxes, 40% increased taxes over the past 5 years that are essentially unsustainable. This will, if it continues the way it is, and we don't come up with the final bill that we're looking for this year, which will be phased in over time, we will revert back to what we have now. And it's going to be untenable to have that kind of money and that kind of increase in education spending for a declining population, so.
Thank you. Next question, Zach?
Just a point of clarification, what's a round? You mentioned one question per round. I was just curious what a round was.
Well, if nobody else wants to ask a question, you can ask another question. But if there's 3 other people asking a question, then let those 3 go and then you can go again. Jonathan, you want to say something about the hospital? You guys
Wow.
threw you under the bus.
Yep, no, I appreciate that, because I do think healthcare is another pressing issue for us across the state. And I carry biases wearing NMC's logo here and appreciate folks talking about frugal towns in Franklin County and our approach. NMC is Vermont's lowest cost outpatient hospital and second lowest cost inpatient hospital. We are that ranking by too much. We have great pride in our frugality and trying to use our resources wisely. We're the hospital in the state that spends the most percentage of our expenses on direct patient care. So it feels like the money's going in a good direction. But at the same time, healthcare is too expensive. We still have folks in Franklin County who incur healthcare bills that are more than they can manage. And so there's work that needs to be done. For us, as we head into the legislative session with you folks, I would caution folks to be careful of legislation that paints with a broad brush. You've seen some Blue Cross Blue Shield advertising out there that NMC is part of and featured in. Talks about a procedure in Burlington that's $17,000 per patient. Exact same procedure at our hospital is $5,000. When we ask for a 3% rate increase, we've averaged about a 3.5% rate increase over the past 5 or 6 years. 3% on $5,000 is $150. 3% on $17,000 is a much different number. And so when the Green Mountain Care Board, who regulates hospital prices, gives an across-the-board rate increase, the folks who are at higher costs are receiving more revenue than the folks who are at the lower end of that scale. And so we've got to find a way as a healthcare system to not only contain growth of costs, but my naive view is to make sure that those that are down at the lower range are indeed sustainable going forward. We've used 1/3 of our cash reserves over our past 5 years. That is not a sustainable trajectory. And our board is focused on this, and we appreciate that. The other piece of legislation I would mention is there's a bill in the legislature that would have the state government appoint 2 independent members to each hospital's board. Our board of directors is elected by the NMC Board of Incorporators. It's up to 150 individuals from throughout Franklin County. They elect 11 of the 12 NMC board members. The other board member is elected by our medical staff as the president of the medical staff. There's a bylaw in place that says up to 3 of the board members, the 12 board members, can be physicians. I'm not sure the benefit of Montpelier choosing 2 other people to put on that board that weren't chosen by the people of Franklin County. It may be important and necessary elsewhere in the state. I've never felt like our board in the 30-something years I've been there was not focused on what was right for the community and the state as well. So I'm not sure what that is actually trying to achieve, but so I would just ask you to look at it carefully as that comes through.
As I noted, thank you for that. Probably everybody in the room knows that Vermont is the highest in this country for healthcare delivery and health insurance. Those are state policies. Those are things that we can help Vermonters with. We just have to get everybody on board with wanting to help. And I always say this, maybe I don't need to, but I feel like it's just something that comes out because I think it's important. Nobody who is involved in decisions that make Vermont less affordable did so maliciously. Down in Montpelier, we talk about this all the time. We have IT issues that are millions and millions of dollars we can't afford. We have deferred maintenance on buildings that are tens of millions, hundreds of millions that we can't afford. We have a lot of these issues, including with healthcare, that through the years we caused. But it wasn't me, but we're still part of the issue. We have to be part of the solution. We here in Vermont have things that we can solve for Vermonters, and healthcare is one of them. I don't know. I mean, I'm in the VA system, so it's like I don't pay that, but I see it. I have employees, I have friends, and we all do, right? We all know somebody who's like, I can't pay this premium.
Tell him I want
Let alone, Penny, you want to talk?
Yeah, oh, you heard me. Oh, you're all set?
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I want to congratulate you guys. You do a hell of a job, okay? Your cost down there, savings is much greater. Your cost of all your services is great. But again, our health care, we're in a situation down there where we're grasping at straws, okay? We're trying to do what's right. Last year, we put the Green Mountain Care Board involved, and they're doing their health care advocates involved, and we had them all in the other day. And Steve Leffler, Green Mountain, Owen Foster, and Mike Fisher. They're all in there, and I'd listened to all of them. They're all different. They all got their ways they want to do things. And I kind of finally said, you know what I think? I I think we gotta put all you guys in a room, and not feed you until you come out with some good answers. And 2 agreed, 1 didn't, but anyway, healthcare, I think it's as crucial as our education department. Education, you just up your taxes, people are gonna struggle, they'll pay it, they'll get it done, whether we get the quality we want, that's another thing. Healthcare, we've got, I think it's 3,000 people right now, I'm not sure exactly that, but that doesn't have insurance in the state of Vermont. And the ones that do, it's up to $25,000 per year for coverage. We can't continue that. And that's one of the reasons I did mention, and I did see your bill, I can't remember the name of it. I said, you know what, we do fine. We're putting something else into law that's not going to amount to anything, okay? We can look at the results instead of that. So we got a long battle in healthcare, and I don't see a quick fix to it right now, so.
I do appreciate the tip that there may not be food at that meeting. I will check the delegation. I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Steve Leffler from UVM Health last week, with Dr. Craig Jones and Dr. Soroyan from the Agency of Human Services, and talk about how NMC can be part of the solution. Are there things being done at the university that could be done in St. Albans and done under our cost structure, and allow NMC to grow and do more at our rates that pulls that care at those prices to us and allows them the room for the tertiary care that they need to focus on. And that starts to feel like some parallels in the education system as well, as to looking at what ought to be done where. For us, it may be an opportunity to grow, and that may be a little naive for an interim, but that is part of the hope, that NMC can actually be part of the solution, that we have some capacity in some of our services that might actually be helpful.
Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Who's going to be replacing former Representative Tooth, and when will that happen?
That is up to the governor, and we wouldn't know until he announces.
Excuse me, people should introduce themselves.
Oh, yes, could you just tell us who you are? Sorry.
That's okay, I'm Heather Kelly.
Oh, yes. But we won't know the answer to that until the governor makes a decision. We're not involved in that. The town committees, or whatever committee or community somebody's from, whatever district, their boards get together and they make recommendations. And so far, I could be wrong on this, but I think so far the ones who have been recommended for replacements last fall and stuff, none of them were taken, and they were, he chose independently. So I can't really give you an answer on that, sorry.
But,
Go ahead.
well, specifically, that's a Franklin 8 seat, which is part St. Albans City, part St. Albans Town. So procedurally, once the resignation is effective, which in this case was the 16th, I believe, of this month, those two committees may canvass the next business day, which they did, and then forward up to 3 names to the governor. The governor's office does not need to accept any of those names, but once those names are submitted, then it's up to the governor as to who is appointed for the balance of the term. But the committees recognize that we would like this to be done in a timely manner since we're mid-session. And Representative Toof, or former Representative Toof, was actually transferred from education to ag just shortly before the end of his tenure. So this individual will be serving in House Ag for the rest of this biennium. So hopefully we know something soon, but I can't give a timeline on it.
Next person, or next question, rather. Yes, ma'am.
Jessica Frost, St. Albans Town. I'll just stay on the healthcare streak with Jonathan. So I work at the hospital, and I also manage the Blueprint for Health in our region. And I just wanted to mention it because you might see it mentioned a lot lately with the rural transformation bill coming down. Blueprint is mentioned quite a few times in there. And just to let you know what we do in our region, we have mental health clinicians, community health workers, care coordinators embedded in pretty much all the primary care practices throughout Franklin County. And they take care of people who have needs that they can't bill for. So people who have multiple high needs that can't get taken care of in 15 minutes, they get referred to the care coordinator or the mental health clinician. And they don't have to bill for those services. So this program's been around for, I wish I knew the date, well over 10 years. Last year there was a gap in funding because of One Care dissolving, and the state did step in and fill that gap, so thank you, that was amazing. We're going to have another gap in funding because we were supposed to join the AHEAD model, and now that's been delayed another year. So the core community health team hasn't seen an increase in funding since they started well over 10 years ago. So what used to fund 20 FTEs is now funding 12 FTEs. Those are very hypothetical numbers, not real numbers. We also embed clinicians in all the spoke practices, so there's always a nurse and a mental health clinician in the spokes for people who need help. So I just wanted to put in plug that it's a great program that's functioning really well in Franklin County and serving a lot of our community members. So when you see it come down, just know it's very worthwhile.
We've got a couple bills that are addressing mental health, and one, I'm not sure of the number. Right now, we've got 5 bills we're working on, trying to get to the floor, and but I think that will be on our list here. I have seen it.
Yeah, I just want to point out that we did receive $195 million from the federal government for the transformation of our healthcare hospitals, organizational situation, transformation, meaning not that you fund programs, but that you change the structure and look at how to make it more efficient and how to deliver it better. Jill Olson is going to be in charge of that. She's been involved with healthcare as a lobbyist for the hospitals and for the home health agencies, and she's very knowledgeable about a lot of these things, and she came in and talked to us about this. That's going to be a little different. I think that what you're talking about, Jessica, and I could be wrong, is you're talking about like the old off-ramp, the RISE was one thing, but we also got an off-ramp on our budget at the hospital because we were doing this preventive thing and trying to work in the community to make people healthier. Maybe Jonathan can answer that, but.
Yeah, I think Blueprint's been around.
Blueprint's been around longer than that. Yeah, Blueprint is,
Yeah, Blueprint is statewide.
Yeah. And that's been around since the mid-2000s. But we also had a preventive effort, and I remember we tried to ride a bicycle with a vegetable smoothie or something.
Yeah, that was RISE was a smoothie.
But that was helpful to us to have some of our budget taken off of the requirements for keeping our expenses down because it was a worthwhile thing. I take it RISE is no longer around.
Right around COVID.
Yeah, because the best way to save healthcare costs is to stay healthy, to get exercise, to eat properly, et cetera, you know.
Okay, I got one thing to say.
Another thing from Alan?
Okay, yeah, about the transformation money, that's like $193 million for 5 years.
Yes.
Okay, it's for rural health care in Vermont.
Yes.
Okay, one of my first questions was define rural. Okay, Vermont defines it as rural area, urban, rural. The federal government defined that as the whole state of Vermont is rural. So there'll be a fight for that money, okay? And we got the money, we got the 193 million, a grant that Jill did, and she did a heck of a good job. But now, I just asked her the other day what the guidelines were, and well, that's to be determined. So I'm hoping mental health in the rural areas, I'm hoping nursing homes, there's a lot of things, but it cannot be used for new construction or salaries. So, but there's some leeways there, so we'll know more about it. She's going to give us another report soon, so we'll see. But that's a lot of money if we do it right. You know, and the only thing I mentioned was let's not blow this money on all the things with our wish list, and then in 5 years we've got to come up with another $2-3 million to keep them going. You know, we got to do this right.
And you know, a lot of us in the room, well, a lot aren't you too, but we're aging. A lot of us are over 50. And so we have a lot of concerns, right, about all these things. But then we look at our kids and our grandchildren. And the life that a lot of us grew up with, that, you know, was relatively affordable. And then our children and our grandchildren can't afford a house because a starter home is $280,000. That's crazy. They can't afford their health insurance that we took for granted because the prices have skyrocketed. And we can go down the list. So those are very real concerns that I think everybody in this room, I don't think anybody wouldn't share those concerns. But how we solve them is a problem. And I can tell you, even, I was gonna say the 12 of us, but there's like 10 of us here. We would even have disagreements. And everybody in this room, if we came up, we'd all have disagreements, and that's okay. But we have to do something to make it more affordable, especially like at the end of the month when you're looking at your checking account and you're like, can I afford to pay the rest? Can I get through? That stinks when you're 52 years old, but it's really hard when you're 22. You know, and this is the life you've always known. You've never known a time where a house was $80,000, let alone 100, you know, say 150. When you've never known insurance policies that you could afford, which hasn't existed really in 20 years now. So, next question, anybody?
Can I just raise
go ahead.
One issue? Sometimes, you know, we talk about each of these individual issues as a problem that needs solving. But there's some common denominators across all the things that we face, such as healthcare costs, high cost of schools, prescription drugs. These are all areas in which we seem to lead the country, of having most expensive this and most expensive that. And we have to, and particularly both as legislators, but also you as citizens, have to keep asking why. Why are we in situations like this time and time again? What are the obstacles or situations that place us at the top of the list in prescription drug pricing, at the top of the list in per pupil cost in schools, or close to the top of the list, and on and on and on? Part of it is, in many cases, the way that we've done things in the past, the complexity that we've added to projects that perhaps don't need the degree of complexity that we continually add, and time. How slow we are at dealing with things. School funding, for example, has been on the agenda for I don't know how long, and the amount of time that we spent last year, almost the entire year working on it, and then had a summer study committee, which is something that we tend to do to study it more, and then at the end of the summer, we didn't do anything except start again this year. We have to get discipline among ourselves, and we have to recognize the time value of everything we do. Every time we build a building that takes 3 years instead of a year to build, increases the cost as inflation continues to rise and rise and rise. These are things, are common denominators that we've seen, and these are the common denominators that we in the General Assembly and you as citizens prodding us have to continue to use. Why did it take so long to build this building? Why did it take so long to approve this permit? Why did it take so long to reject this permit? And here we see months and years going by in which we talk and talk and talk and talk and we don't act. And that is a core portion of the problem that we are continuing to face, and we have to.
Thank you. And sir in the back, if you just sit down.
Bill McIntosh, St. Albans. Speaking of housing, you talked about the starter house at $300,000. Did anyone want to talk about the logic behind the Reggiano development, where they're talking about homes starting at $400,000, and the zoning has been changed to be half of what it currently is?
Where is that? I mean, does anybody know?
So I can answer the part of that. The question I think is about the project up on Prospect Hill.
Yes, exactly.
And then I can let someone talk about the CHIP project, or the CHIP bill that we passed last year. The housing requirements, I'll let you guys talk about the changes in legislation, but basically they're building houses up on, there's a plan for about 80 houses up on Prospect Hill that will have, that was, the engineer had mentioned that it would cost around $300,000 per home. I believe, is that what they said in
the article said 400.
In the article, 400,000, okay,
yeah,
400,000.
By the time it's done.
Yeah, in the messenger, it was said 400,000. I think part of that is building costs, permits, all the things things that go into filling in the development, having paving the driveways, stuff. But if you guys will talk about CHIP, this new CHIP program that was passed last year is kind of what is allowing development on smaller lots and things like that.
Thank you, Casey. So CHIP is Community Housing Infrastructure Program. It was originally it was the language I actually had introduced in the House and passed through the Senate last year. And the idea behind it was that we know that Vermont's TIF programs work really well, especially in St. Albans. We've seen that work really well. But understanding that there are other municipalities, other towns that just don't have the same capacity to facilitate a TIF district. We really wanted to make those types of projects, so the idea behind it was a project-based TIF, and that's how we got CHIP. So it's going to allow for smaller projects to get buy-in, and where a developer themselves can finance and choose to finance through this program. And it's for things like wastewater, anything you kind of consider infrastructure. That being said, I do want to point out that in the state of Vermont, $400,000 for a single unit is pretty average. And that's really what I've been working on the last 3 years, what many of us have been working on. We're seeing, after COVID or during COVID, we saw these influx of ARPA monies. I think most of our committees saw that, but specifically in our housing investment, we saw hundreds of millions of dollars put there. And I think there were some really fantastic programs that have been established. I'm thinking of VHIP, which allows homes or units that are not necessarily online, so they're not habitable, they need help with wiring, heating. It gives landlords the ability to work towards that. They get $50,000 grants. They have to match about at least 10% of it, and they get $50,000 in efforts to get these units online. Really the problem becomes then how can we create housing in a way that's sustainable in the places that we want to, and keeping Vermont's character the way that it's been. So one of the things that we've continuously been hearing this past year from developers, stakeholders, pretty much everybody is coming in saying that our permitting is taking too long. It's incredibly duplicative. And you have several permits for the same project, and it's costing over $100,000. So where is that going to go? A developer is not going to eat that money. They're going to put it back into the cost of the home. Of course, we're seeing inflation, costs of materials going up. So it's kind of, there's not going to be a silver bullet. But in a similar way, we're kind of getting hit from all angles of housing. We also see a workforce development that's struggling, and so we don't have individuals to build the housing. And of course, with Vermont being the lovely state it is, we also are kind of up against weather as well. So there are a lot of efforts that we're working on to kind of push forward, ensuring that we get inventory and that we do it in a way that is affordable and not just capital A affordable and lowercase a affordable, just affordable for the everyday Vermonter. One thing I will say that we're working on is a rural finance bill, specifically in tax stabilization and assessment districts, in hopes that, so you have kind of the TIF districts are going to help big projects. The CHIP that we worked on last year is going to help, I would say, more medium projects, but really the small towns that have housing goals of 50 when they see maybe 1 or 2 houses built a year. Hopefully it gives another option for municipalities and developers alike to really put inventory in, and when we know we have more inventory, the price goes down.
Great, thank you very much.
Of course.
Joe, then Randy.
Yeah, and I apologize, I don't know about the intricacies of the project in the south end of town. but a couple of years ago, it was made easier to develop housing in areas serviced by municipal sewer and water. A lot of them became Act 250 exempt. But at the same time, it became more onerous to develop outside those areas, also known as most of Vermont. So there is a bill this year, because there's something that I don't know the exact footage, but there's a road rule.
Yes.
Okay, whereby, is it 90 feet?
800 feet.
800 feet. So if you're, so you could ostensibly need an Act 250 process to put up a 10 by 10 shed on your property, which is kind of ridiculous. And so, I mean, there are some people who think when they talk about, you know, where housing should be in Vermont, that should pretty much all be in village and municipal centers, and it should be made almost impossible to do in the balance of the state, which I don't think is the majority's opinion. And Ashley, you touched on permitting reform, but one thing we can do as a legislature is make the permitting process more expedient. So, for example, and I know there's at least a piece of a bill, if somebody asked for a wastewater permit from ANR, Natural Resources. You know, Natural Resources should have so much time to say yes or no. You know, here, you get 60 days to make a decision or whatever, pick a reasonable time. And in the absence of a decision, which happens a lot now, then the answer is yes. You know, something along those lines. Because carrying costs for these projects and inflation, which is a very real thing, are part of what is driving the cost of housing in the state.
I'm going to say the same thing that Joe did, but perhaps in a slightly different way. We talk about how much housing has increased in cost over the year. And I had a constituent gave me that argument at length, and at length it was valid. That person bought his home for $300,000, which was a lot of money, in 1986. And without thinking about it at all, you can simply go to a chart, a formula that shows what the value of the dollar is today versus the dollar in 1986. And the difference was that person's home today on paper with no additions whatsoever, just the time value of money, is worth $1.7 million. Time. And that's why I go back to that issue of not taking so long to do things. When we start to build a housing project, it was a housing project in South Burlington that was planned, had to go through Act 250, large amounts of money, thousands if not over 100,000 in the investment just to build it. But the issue was time, because it took them 3 years to get their permit. And imagine what the price of all the components to that building went up in that 3-year period, just by that delay. That again goes to the issue, we have to do things faster.
Mm-hmm. And I know Lisa has something, and Matt, and I'll just make a very brief summary. I can tell you from inflation over the last few years, everything since COVID has skyrocketed, right? Some people know that I own a convenience store. We had a project that before COVID was $189,000. Got stopped because of COVID. To do half the project today, $600,000. So we're facing really, really, really heavy headwinds. Lisa, then Matt.
Thank you. So the bill that Joe referenced, there are actually a couple of them. The one that I co-sponsored is H730, which is with the leaders of the Rural Caucus. Act 181 of 2024 was a piece of sweeping legislation. And it created something that took the place of the Natural Resources Board, which was reviewing all your Act 250 permits and putting rules into place. So what took the place of the Natural Resources Board is the LURB, the Land Use Review Board. And in that, it gave the LURB a lot of power. In conjunction with the LURB, your regional planning commissions are mapping the entire state. It's going very slowly. There are only, I believe, 2 regional planning commissions that have submitted their plans to the state. And they're in bigger municipalities. I think one of them the first one is in the Rutland area, and I can't recall where the second one is. So basically, this mapping is dividing Vermont into 4 different tiers: Tier 1A, Tier 1B, Tier 2, and Tier 3. It's all well and good to say that we want our development to happen in village centers. That's great, because a lot of them have water, wastewater, other public services. However, there are many people who cannot afford to build in our more urban centers, our town centers. And there are many people who want to live on the land outside of that. So Tier 2 and Tier 3, which are outside of those areas, are places like where I represent, which is Franklin 5, which I neglected to say earlier, on the Canadian border: Highgate, Franklin, Berkshire, and Richford. And for the most part, Franklin and Berkshire will all be in Tier 2 and Tier 3. And as Randy referenced, those areas are going to be much more restricted. And much of that is going to be because of this thing called the road rule, which is an 800-foot driveway or a combined driveway system building a development of 2,000 feet. So anybody that wants to build is going to have to trigger Act 250 to build in those areas. Part of this Bill H730 is to delay the implementation of the tiers, and also to require notification to every landowner in the state of Vermont that, hey, all of a sudden, your land may not be developable as you thought it might be. And that's an issue because many rural dwellers, particularly folks who have farmland that maybe is being rented out to neighbors to use, but they're counting on that for their retirement, they may not be able to sell that land and use it for the intent that they wanted to, which would be to sell it to somebody who wants to build a house so they have money for their retirement. So this bill is essentially delaying all of that and notifying folks that this might happen if the bill passes. It certainly faces steep opposition, but there are a number of other bills, not just to delay, but to repeal these laws that were enacted in Act 181. So more about that coming. I know a lot of you read my articles in the St. Albans Messenger or online. I'll be talking about this quite a bit, but this is the one bill right now that the Rural Caucus is focusing on because it's really important to people who live in truly rural areas of Vermont that don't have downtowns, that have water or wastewater systems.
Matt?
Thank you. Back to that, my overall feedback on the housing piece. 3 years ago, we had a presentation in the preview legislative day. It's the most valuable thing I've seen at the State House. They had a presentation from one of the housing UPs, and they did a top 10 reasons of why housing is so expensive. And they started out with, and it basically went, if you think that housing in Vermont is expensive because of permitting, you're right. And if you think housing in Vermont is expensive because of second homes, you're right. And if you think your housing is expensive in Vermont because of the new Airbnb and development in that area, you're right. And it went down the entire list of things like what we specifically talked about, which the government can try to address, which is permitting and funding and whatnot. But one of the things that really sticks home to me, and the way that Senator Brock talks about how things are overarching, it's a demographic change that is just, that cannot be changed by anything the legislature does. There's still 600,000 people in this state, just like there was when I was born here in the last millennium, and then some, way back when. The difference was that the average household had over 3 and headed towards 4 people per household. And so 600,000 divided by 3 plus was we needed less than 200,000 housing units. And now we are just dropped under 2 per housing unit and we're headed lower. So 600,000 divided by 2 means we only need over 300,000 housing units. The demographic change in our household makeups is massive, and the amount of aging population that is staying in their home far beyond the time that would have ever otherwise been. And those houses are not going back on the market at any quick rate because families that do inherit those homes either have their own home already or don't have to put it right back out on the market for that money. We have one of the highest in the nation vacant home rates every night in this state compared to the entire rest of the country. So the demographics have changed massively. We have house upon house that used to have 3, 4, and 5, and 6 people in it that now has 1. And that's the biggest difference. And no legislation is going to change those demographic pieces. And I guess as far as the affordability continues on all those pieces, and as long as those houses that are $400,000 in that piece sell, and they sell quickly, and as long as you can put your home up on the market and it sells quickly, somebody else is in line to pay the property taxes that continue to go up. And we are mostly the minority in the legislature, and I contend that the majority has not run out of other people's money to spend yet. And as long as those houses are selling briskly, I don't think the drive is there to completely curb the cost of everything. And the demographics in our schools and the demographics in our homes are the exact same thing. Less and less students, but not a, if it's truly a crisis, there would be a far more action in that building to curb the cost. If it was truly a housing crisis, there'd be far more action. And I remind you that we are very much the minority in what drives that building. And so that's my real political rant for today. But the demographics against us hugely, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, and they're not going to be fixed by any government regulation. So the last part I'd say is that your issue on the project you had that was $159,000 is now $500,000. In the transportation world, that's what we're up against every day. Every bridge, every mile of pavement that was X is now 5 times X, and our revenues continue to go down in transportation. That's a whole other area that I deal with regularly. I don't deal with housing every day. I just deal with the frustration of how do my kids buy a house here. So thank you for listening.
Yes, sir.
Jay, I just wanted to say.
Oh, yeah.
Before you go, sorry, I forgot to mention at the beginning that if you need to use a restroom, it's just down the hall here to the right before the door. So please, if you need to get up and use that, that's where it is.
Sir.
I'm David Ray, I live in the town of St. Albans. I'm going to date myself. I used to be a home builder back in the 70s. I agree with Randy that inflation is crazy with home building. We used to build houses there's 3 houses on Newton Road I drive by every day that were sold for $30,000, and they were 3-bedroom ranch houses on, 3/4 of an acre of land. Back in those days, we were able to finance a lot of our houses through FHA and FMHA. We ran out of money when the interest rates in the 70s got up into the 16-18%, and we went to Washington and were able to pick up additional funds for houses for entry-level home buyers. Is there any kind of that money that's out there anymore, or do all homeowners now have to face that going 6.5% interest rates?
Yeah, I'm going to just say that I sold real estate back in the 80s, early 90s, and I think a starter home was between $75,000 and $95,000, and that was considered reasonable. VHFA had different mortgage levels as a help to first-time home buyers mostly, different levels based on where you lived, so we were lower than Burlington, and maybe the Kingdom was lower than we were as far as what you could finance. We have, and I don't know exactly which one it is, there is a group, and it might be a government program, or it might be a nonprofit that helps put low-income deposits. Yeah, it helps with your down payment help for first-time home buyers. But I'd like to go to a larger issue. All of this housing issue and all of the issue of the demographics and the fact that everything is so expensive at this point. It's all intertwined with your schools, your property taxes, the workforce, trying to get enough people to come and work at the hospital or to come and work in anything. We have the demographics where we don't have enough referees for our schools to go and monitor our games. We don't have enough people in the post office. There are people in the state who can't get their mail delivered. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough anybody that works in healthcare. We don't have enough teachers. We don't have enough anything because we don't have the people here. And if you can't afford to move here, you can't get a middle-level manager to come here from out of state to help your company to grow, which often, you can get entry-level right out of school or out of college, and you've got the owner or the people, we're talking about people who are running the company, but you need that in-between level, people who have expertise who will come here from Boston or someplace else, Connecticut, New York, wherever, New Hampshire. They don't move here because the cost of housing is so high. And so we lose a lot of different things And we've got this declining demographic. We've lost like 120,000, we had 120,000 students back in 1997. And the JFO, the Joint Fiscal Office, can show you how that has gone down over the years. It's now at like 83 or 80,000 students. This has an impact on our schools. It has an impact on our workforce. It has an impact on the state colleges and trying to keep them open. I mean, we have got to sit down and find a way to address the affordability issue across all of this so that we can, and one of it is scale. We can build houses one by one, but that won't do it. We put a lot of money into the Vermont Housing Conservation Fund and into a variety of housing, special housing nonprofits that go and build affordable housing for low-income or senior citizens, and they're building them at $578,000 per unit for a small 2-bedroom unit that's primarily in the downtown areas, 2 bedrooms over the store on Main Street. I mean, the people who have children don't want to live in an apartment, small apartment on Main Street. They want to live out in the country. Okay. And so we have to go and re-examine what we're doing so we can create abundance rather than scarcity.
So, Randy, do you know if there's any programs such as what was mentioned, BHFA and stuff?
There are probably 1,000 programs, which again is part of the problem, is the complexity is such that it's very difficult to find things. But if you go to the state's website and you look under housing, look at the Vermont Housing Finance Agency as a start, and there are a number of others besides that are both public and then public-private nonprofits. There are a number of nonprofits that are involved in the housing issue. Gus Selig's organization,
Vermont VHCB.
Yeah, Vermont Housing Conservation Board is one of those that provides a lot of funding for housing for people who are on the lower income scale, and they use a variety of complex mechanisms in order to get the money to do that, ranging from tax credits to loans to a variety of things, and the complexity of it is mind-boggling, which makes it also more difficult for people to find. I still go back to Jim Douglas, Governor Jim Douglas. I've heard him speak probably 1,000 times, and probably in half those times he's got the solution to many of our abundance problems here in Vermont, and that is for the audience. Go have some kids. Go have some kids. That's what we probably need more than anything else. We need people, and we need people to occupy our empty housing. We need people to do the work that we don't have the people to do. Go have some kids.
Irene.
Thank you, Irene Renner, former senator for Fairfax, among other towns. And I guess I would add to Senator Brock's comment about why does it take so long, and I would ask, why does it cost so much? I found oversight to be a real challenge when I was in the legislature, and then I was, and that was in sort of the technology realm, because I sat on a technology committee among others. But then I read about how a lot of flood recovery money was somehow slipping out to Guidehouse, which is a private equity firm, and they were somehow getting a lot more money than was originally intended that was supposed to go to like recovering houses from floods. So I guess this goes for all of your committees. How do we get more oversight so that we're not leaking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars when we're so focused on education or housing or those headline issues, and we're somehow letting those consultants just rob us blind?
I'll give a short one, and then you can do the long one. As you know from the legislature, you probably every single day had people testify that you're like, wow, this sounds pretty good, that sounds reasonable. And then you had other times where you're like, this doesn't sound right. I don't know that you're lying to me, but it doesn't seem like the whole picture. And that's been one of my biggest frustrations for 8 years, because I don't need to leave Vermont to be frustrated. It is extremely frustrating that I don't believe, and I was upstairs, well, nobody knows what upstairs is, sorry. I was at Human Services for 6 years, and a lot of money goes through there, and a lot of programs that are supposed to help people. And when you're sitting there taking testimony, as Irene would very well know, you take testimony and you see money going out the door, and you're like, okay, but where's the progress? Or how did this cost this much for what you were delivering? And I know Randy and I have had this conversation a million times. I always differentiate whenever somebody talks about affordable housing. I'm like, is it affordable housing or is it subsidized housing? They're not the same thing, not at all. And when the money goes out the door, we have a responsibility to be a lot more, responsible is not really the right word, but concerned or whatever. I don't know what word you want to use, it doesn't really matter. But where that money is going, and to not just take people's words for where it's going. And I know that there are people that have the mentality, well, look, I don't treat everybody like a liar. You don't have to, but you're responsible for people's money. And I know how I feel when people waste my money, and there's people that have even less than I do, and I don't have any. So it is our responsibility. So that's something that I know many of us talk about every day. How do you solve it? I don't know. But, Randy?
Well, one of the ways you solve it is you put more emphasis on accountability. Accountability, we have this tendency, and I criticize the legislature, when we make a mistake, we move on to the next problem, and we never really effectively look back as to what went wrong so that we can prevent it from happening again. That, I think, is a deficiency of our government. Risk oversight means taking a look at what's happening and is it going the way you intended? Are the results what you intended? And are there areas in which improvement can be made? I think we should invest more in the state auditor's office in order to have people who are actually charged independently with going around and seeing what went wrong. One of the worst things that always happens is the people who are responsible for the problem are the ones who have to investigate it to find out what happened, and you're not going to get good results when that happens. The second thing, when I had to speak with new legislators last year, talking about, well, what should they look out for, I gave them 2 books to read. One is called Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's Law is work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion. And it harks back to the British Navy between World War I and World War II. The number of ships declined. The number of men in the Navy declined. The number of officers declined. The number of shipyard repair people declined. But the number of bureaucrats in the Admiralty increased at a set rate year after year after year. That happens in government. Everybody wants to have 1 more person or 2 more people or 3 more people. I've never had a group come to me since I've been in the legislature saying, we're kind of overstaffed and we'd like to cut back a little bit because we can do better with technology and reduce the amount of labor. It's never happened yet. I'm still waiting for it. So that's one issue. The second book was How to Lie with Statistics. Do you know that 87.5% of statistics presented to the legislature are made up on the spot? That's what it seems like. We take a look at statistics and we don't pay attention to them, and we don't hold them to what they are really telling us. And what it's really telling us so often is we are increasing the number of staff over and over and over again, and we're not looking at things that have gone wrong so as to make sure they don't go wrong the next time. Those are key elements. Those are key elements that you as citizens can do, is ask questions. Ask hard questions and ask your legislators to find out, why is the cost of education as high as it is? What are the things that make it continually more expensive year after year, despite all the promises of reducing costs, and we don't do it? And you should hold us to account.
And before the next question, the auditor does a pretty decent job, I think, overall. I mean, we're always going to disagree, but anybody that's been in a building, especially in these seats, has heard legislators say, he's a pain in the butt. We don't have to listen to him. No, you kind of do.
No, there's no teeth. Other states, I've talked to the auditor's office, other states have state auditors who have more teeth and more ability to force the issue. Here it's more advisory and guidance, so a lot of times what I've watched is the committee saying, thank you very much to the auditor, maybe you experienced this too, Senator Brock, when you were there, and go do whatever the legislators felt like doing, and that just discounts my desire to have a stronger, more fleshed out auditor's office, because if all that good research that they're doing and all those strong letters that they're writing have no teeth, then we're just stuck.
No, it's 100% true, and I know I pay way too much attention to the stuff outside of here than I should, which is probably why I'm all sad, but Massachusetts has a similar problem. Their auditor found pretty big problems, and they're like, yeah, we're just gonna ignore you. Lisa?
Thank you. I just am processing everything I'm hearing here, and in the last little while, this is kind of what I'm getting out of this discussion and the questions and the answers. Quite a while ago, I sat on the General and Housing Committee. So there were, Mr. Braylon, programs such as what you were asking about. Unfortunately, some of them have gone by the wayside because ARPA funding is no longer available and state funding is really tight right now. But what I see here is, in my observations in my 8 years in the legislature, is there's a big difference between what we would call affordable and what is really subsidized housing. I don't feel like there is a big shortage of subsidized housing that is available to folks. However, there is a huge shortage of what we think of as affordable housing for individuals who are trying to come into our beautiful state because they love it, they think it's beautiful. There's a lot to offer young families in our state. These are the folks who are nurses and they're teachers, and there are bank clerks, things like that. So I feel like I know there's a shortage of that type of housing. The bottom line that both Representative Dickinson, Representative Walker, and also Senator Brock has pointed out is we need more people. We need people to populate our schools so our school cost isn't so high per pupil. We need people to fill jobs. We have so many job vacancies. We have so many companies that are leaving the area because the employees just aren't here to fill those jobs. We need to backfill community volunteer positions. How many of you live in towns that are that have select boards where there's a vacancy, or even worse, development review boards, planning commissions, those volunteer positions, they're just not being filled. I know of several boards in Franklin County where my town has no representative because no one has stepped forward to volunteer for those positions. We need to bring people in by being an affordable state, but the problem with that is we are not an affordable state. We have high fuel costs, we lack services for the money that we do pay taxes on. We have long transportation commutes to work, to services, to recreation. Even our kids going to school, there's long transportation times for a lot of them. So I don't know what the answer to making us more affordable so that we can attract all of those people. And that's like the big problem in the legislature where we keep going around and around. It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And I did want to address former Senator Renner. My committee has taken back up the Government Accountability Bill, which I'm sure she's familiar with, to go through various state oversight positions like the auditor and look at the reports that are generated and what's done with those reports. Do they even get looked at? So we're digging into that, which I think is really important because sometimes we're spending money on things that really don't matter. And that is important to my committee to try to sort that out. Thank you.
And, the other part, and Senator Brock hit on this a few times, is no matter what's done in Montpelier, at the end of the day, Vermonters have to make sure that whatever it is that they push for, right? The auditor could have more teeth, and he could come down with a decision. He's like, you gotta fix this issue. But if Vermonters don't support it, then it'll still fall apart. So we all have to be in a team together. Lauren, right? Lindsay, I don't know why I said that. I'll get it right eventually.
I'm in St. Albans City. I just want to say I really appreciate what Representative Hango said, specifically about getting more young people to move here, because I've heard a couple of times Senator Brock say that we need to have more children, and I really just want to push back against that because my peers of childbearing age are leaving the state choosing not to have children. I have two friends who are in their 30s who just moved back in with their parents because they can't afford their rent, and they have 2 jobs. I personally have 2, sometimes 3 jobs, and I have a college degree that I had to get the job that I have, and I get paid really well in the job. I cannot afford to have children right now, and many of my peers are saying, I wish I could have kids or have more children, and I can't afford that. So I think that just encouraging us to have more children is really missing the mark, and is honestly kind of insulting to the situation that we're feeling every single day. And many of my peers have moved out of state because of the unaffordability, and they can't purchase a house. They've moved to the South. I have a best friend who lives in North Carolina because she can't afford to live here. She's now having a child in North Carolina. So I just want to really appreciate what you said about keeping young people here and bringing more young people into the state rather than just having us procreate.
Thank you, Lindsay. I didn't get your last name, but that's okay. Somebody will tell me. I have 4 kids in their 30s, so they're all your age and all in varying stages of where they live and what kind of families they have. And I totally get what you're saying. Only 1 out of the 4 live in Vermont. The other 3 have bolted the state pretty much and will probably never come back. So I get it. So that's why I'm so passionate about how do we get not necessarily even young, like college-age students to come to Vermont, but how do we get those individuals who are in their mid-20s and 30s to stay in Vermont. And I'm not sure how we go about it, but we certainly don't go about it by only offering jobs that are minimum wage pay or maybe seasonal. We really need to have full-time, well-paying jobs with good benefits for individuals to put down roots here, and whether they choose to or not, build families, or at least build communities. And that, to me, is the bottom line of why we're in the situation we're in, because we are the 2nd oldest state in the nation. I forget the year, but I just read a statistic that 1 out of every 3 Vermonters is going to be over 65, and the year is very soon. It's coming up. And my generation, it falls right into that. So it's very scary to think about what our increased needs are going to be and how much it's going to cost. Housing for seniors, health care for older Vermonters, transportation for older Vermonters. It's just going to pile up, and all of a sudden we're going to turn around and say, who is taking care of us? Because we may not be able to take care of ourselves. And I feel like Vermont is going to be in a really bad place. And that's one of the reasons why I answered the call to go to Montpelier, is to try to solve these problems. I didn't really realize what I was up against because there are a lot of individuals who don't want to face up to these hard realities, and being in the minority,
Sorry.
So I appreciate your comments, Lindsay.
And I'll make a brief comment and then we'll end with Senator Brock. Lisa mentioned chicken and egg, and you and I talked at NCSS about this issue. So my son's in this general age group, and they have a baby and one on the way, and it's very costly. But something that's really uncomfortable for people to talk about, and if you like sociology or anything else, everybody knows nobody ever wants to be told they're wrong, right? But especially in this role, you have to be able to say I was wrong, or I participated in something that was wrong, or maybe I had great values, but here's the result that wasn't good. We live in a state that is extremely expensive. That didn't happen by itself. Policies made that happen. And those policies are doubled down on a lot. Sometimes the policies, people wait a minute, what do we do? And we're trying to fix them. But a lot of times people double down on those policies and made Vermont really expensive. And it's not right, it's not fair, but nobody's doing it. Obviously, we all know this with a bad heart. Many people think that they're really helping. And we all think we're really helping, and maybe we're doing something wrong, who knows? But I don't like seeing people leave. I don't like being in my age and thinking I can't afford to live here, let alone being young. And I can't have a child because I can't afford to live here. Watching people go to Carolina is a great example, or Tennessee or whatever. What are they doing right that's attracting people other than the weather? They are doing things that we can emulate some of them, and the things that don't work, we don't have to emulate. But we can change, and it just takes a little humility on the part of alleged leaders to be able to say, hey, listen, these things aren't working. We meant well, but they're not working. Randy, you'll have the last word, and we'll head out into the snow.
My point when I said have more children, what I meant by that was not that you're doing anything wrong, but we're doing something wrong. We're not doing something of creating an environment that makes it desirable and profitable for you to have more children, and we are doing some things in those areas. They are marginally making an improvement, and if we invest more, I think we will make a greater improvement. The tourism industry, for example, we have some great people in Montpelier, are part of that department, the director of tourism. She is focused not just on bringing in tourists, but bringing in people who will actually want to become residents. There's part of that program that's designed to have that larger result, and it is making some difference. There are things that we're doing in economic development by attracting industries and attracting more industries, some of them small, but some of them grow like Beta Technologies to become a billion-dollar corporation in the stock market. We have to take companies like that, though, and make sure that we can meet their needs, and we can be a mechanism by which we can increase the population of people like them. And that is beginning to work. But we have to do a lot of hard work. We have to do some changes in what we do as a legislature, changes in what we do in building houses and setting rules and regulations, and also in making it easier for companies like that to be able to succeed. And that's how we'll get the population that we need, among other things.
Thank you. And real quick.
It has to do with education. I think BFA has around 900 to 1,000 kids in it. Statistic I hear that only about 50% of them are going to college. So my question is, why do we continue to give a liberal arts education to these kids that aren't going to college? Wouldn't it be better to expand the tech program up there?
We have done that. We've done it statewide. There's a great emphasis, and there will be legislation that you'll see this year that focus on career technical education, expanding it, and there's a program, or rather a plan right now that we're discussing in the Economic Development Committee that changes how we manage and supervise and coordinate technical education and integrate it better into secondary education and secondary education institutions. So there's a lot of work being done in that area, and you have a very valid point.
It'll come hopefully in the future, but I think a lot of us would like to see it quicker. It should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah, just the kids that come out of that program right now, they can go to work for Joe and they can make $45,000 without having a college debt. The college kids are coming out with it. I hear some of them are struggling with that college education to make that kind of money.
Absolutely. Ma'am, just the last question.
James, I can talk about that.
Yeah, we're not going to stay here.
We're past time.
Okay.
Ma'am, just ask your last question.
Yes, my name is Mary McDermott, Georgia. I think we need, well, my opinion, we need to see about doing something to protect our immigrants. We've seen ICE everywhere. Our immigrants are doing jobs that none of us would do. And if they're gone, who's going to do those jobs? They come in, they're taking them, even if they're here legally, it doesn't matter. They're the wrong color. They don't ask them until they're God knows where. And what are we going to do to protect them? What can we do?
Who has a hand? Bob?
Bob might want to speak.
Oh, do you want to talk about that, Bob?
Oh, well, thank you for that question, Marianne. We're dealing with several bills right now in Senate Judiciary in reference to the present federal administration as to how they're dealing with these folks you're talking about throughout the United States. And we have had some instances here in Vermont. Most of the things we're dealing with now is the masking clause, which is under 208, I believe, and 209 is the safe buildings throughout the state of Vermont, everything from schools, hospitals, state buildings, public buildings, whatever else. So those are things that are being addressed presently, but we still have to deal with what's referred to as the federal supremacy clause, which means that federal law rules the land, obviously. And Vermont can make things stricter, but we can't impede upon federal law. So those are areas that we're trying to work around within Senate Judiciary. And I'll tell you, we don't have all the answers when it comes to that, Marianne. But those are discussions that are happening in Senate Judiciary, and they'll continue to happen until these come to the floor, both in the House and the Senate. But I appreciate that question.
Thank you guys so much, and enjoy the day, but drive safe, please.
Apologies for going over.